But first
Yeah.
thing I'm gonna say is just before we get into everything, bro. How are you doing, and what might you want to say to anybody who's listening, bro?
Uh, I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Obviously given the circumstance, but from a mental health standpoint, I'm doing well. Ironically, I think one of the best counselors I ever had in my life, I found in here, right?
Yeah.
But overall, I'm doing well mentally, physically, emotionally. You know, I still have my days, but definitely understanding what's going on outside. I guess it makes me feel a little bit better to know that people are struggling on the outside too. But I'm just joking. But I'm just joking. But yeah, nah. Overall, I'm all right. Um, once I changed my perspective on things, that definitely helped.
So obviously, you're still very jubilant, still cracking jokes, which is great. But you mentioned like changing the perspective. Just when did that happen, and what kind of caused you to have that shift?
Well, man, I always seek knowledge, and I believe you can learn from anyone. And a lot of guys in here, especially like the OGs, are very knowledgeable about things. So you have this certain idea of what being incarcerated is like, and typically from like the movies or the media, or whatever. And then you get here and you see, what's real. And as a reflective person, I just start reflecting on this, right? And then one thing that really stood out to me is when you speak to people who have life in prison, that opens up a whole new idea of how you see life. And as well, I just got my appeals decision, my first appeals decision, and they denied it. And one of the main reasons they denied it is because it wasn't put uh in a timely manner, which is crazy. But I felt some type of way about that. And then there was a dude who had did like 25 years, a black dude, and he was like, "Listen here, brother," and he basically sat me down and spoke to me, and he gave me like information and articles of how the system works. And granted, I already know how the system works. I studied it. I'm going through it, but just to see it from a different point of view is really like, man, I kind of really didn't have a chance. It was like an uphill battle, right? So I guess I kind of acquiesce to it at this point and try to like live in hope, no matter how small that is.
Mm, yeah. And honestly, bro, just we talk and stay in contact, but just hearing you kind of put words to all of this, like in this interview format, actually has me tripped up a little bit. So forgive me if I'm not as smooth. So I
That's
want
all
to
right.
kind of, not because this is like, dang, we have to really contextualize this stuff for people now. So I want to talk, about the appeals decision a little bit. So for the folks, and bro, feel free to correct me, at any point in time. But obviously, most folks who are listening to this, know that our loved one and friend Davelle is currently incarcerated, and has submitted an appeal to the decision that was unfortunately denied. And everyone knows and that it's aware of this case that you are completely innocent. Absolutely no evidence to suggest anything. So can you just talk about kind of, I guess, just where your support team is in terms of kind of like just next steps immediately after that decision regarding the appeal, just so folks are up to speed before we go into some of the other deeper topics you mentioned.
Yeah, of course. So, like, I have an appeals attorney. I think he's been really good. He's been very honest and transparent and, and diligent. Uh, so right now, the verdict came back, I'm locked up, and he, putting in the motions for me, there's various motions that he's seen that, that we can, use for our appeal. So he wrote up the appeal. I looked over it, revised it, and then submitted it. So basically, you in a lot of states, especially Ohio, you have a district appeals court, right? So you don't appeal to the same county. So you appeal to a district court, and it's strictly judges on there. And then once you put a notice of appeal, and then once we appealed, you go to an oral argument, And so my lawyer went to that, and then he actually was feeling good about it. And then we got the appeal back, and because they have to give you a reason. So we're looking at the reasoning, and it was obviously less than desired. Um, but it was kind of, I would say, shocking, but also a revelation because it really reads as if they didn't actually read the appeal
Mm.
and strictly went off of the prosecution. And I kind of know this because uh, appeals courts or judges oftentimes act as extensions of the prosecutions versus
Mm.
being truly impartial. So that's something that I'm like, okay, I see. And then we had what you call I believe a criminal rule 33 or 31, which basically like, juror misconduct, because one of the jurors actually graduated high school with
Yep.
my father, and then, you know, they
Didn't
barely did an
disclose that, right?
investigation on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She didn't disclose it. So they asked her. She said, "Oh no, I don't remember," and then they just, went with it. So like even reading it, you can see I would say the bias and the racial undertones even in their response. But next step is we're going to continue to do the post conviction and take it up to the Ohio Supreme Court and or try to get at least the charges amended. So that's where we stand right now.
I appreciate the update, bro. And I think that's definitely going to be something valuable for folks to just to be able to track. I want to go back because a lot of things that you continue to open up, but um, you mentioned like receiving some of the best mental health support and therapy that you feel like you have in your life while inside. And so I kind of want, you to just go a little bit deeper into that because, you have been just a warrior, I think a champion for mental health and somebody who's been very transparent the entire time I've known you as acknowledging just what you need to do to kind of have your own wellness regarding your mental health be where it needs to be. So can you just talk about like kind of what your journey has been like? Because I remember even before all this went down, just waiting up into a decision, you had certain thoughts about how you would navigate the space, but I think you really um, for the better really surprised me, bro. So can you just talk about like what that journey has been like for you so far?
Yeah, man. Well, it was tough because, starting from the beginning, I was just blindsided by the whole thing, especially being arrested, getting locked up and, being on house arrest. Um, so that really like, just messed up my mental health. So obviously I had a lot of suicidal ideation and I had that before just in general, but it was just like really, really intense. Um, and then I remember I spoke to my friend and she was like, Daville, you have to live your freedom into existence. She's a
Mm.
very manifester, the rocks and all of that. So I'm like, okay. So I'm doing with that. Then I go to uh, therapy. I go to therapy and um, I get diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is basically a mix between schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And basically all of the stress that I was dealing with was causing me to have psychosis, right? And once the verdict came back and I actually got locked up, surprisingly the psychosis actually kind of like mitigated, probably because I'm in this environment where I need to be very locked in. But
Mm.
I think my case may be a little bit different as far as my movement through the mental health space here, because
Mm.
initially when I first went to our prison reception center, it was absolutely horrible. They took me off my medication because they said they didn't provide it. So I was basically raw dogging my mental health while I'm in this cell that's like
Mm.
98 degrees in the summer, and so that like amplified it. Um, and I'm just going through it. I'm going through withdrawals, and thank God I had a good cellmate that was like looking out for me. But yeah, man, it was actually like really tough. And then once I got to this institution, uh, I spoke to the nurse practitioner and like a counselor slash caseworker. And like I said, I'm pretty sure this is not the norm. Actually, I know it's not the norm, but I spoke to my caseworker and counselor, and he's just a phenomenal dude. Like again, he's probably one of the best therapists that I've had, or counselors that I had. And then my nurse practitioner, she just very, like being like within the public health space, what you want to see from public health and medical practitioners, they exemplify it. Um,
Right.
but I've heard different stories from different practitioners that's in this specific institution, and definitely from other institutions, right? I know people who quite literally is on a autistic spectrum or have severe mental health cases, and they're just being neglected. Like overall, health is not really a priority here. They do what they can to make sure you don't die and or get
Right.
sued.
Right.
Um, and that's pretty much the extent of it. So I'm grateful that I at least found or was assigned these two individuals.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, it's not crazy because like you stated, there's a lot of things about the system that you already knew, but just the reality that it is kind of left up to chance, like in terms of your health. There's a whole. I mean, that's a whole, different topic to explore. Um, I want to talk about just the reality of something that you mentioned which was the system, and kind of this older cat being able to give you some articles and different things to read to kind of just understand what's going on. I mean, so what are your thoughts about that? Like, freedom kind of unfortunately like as a commodity, but particularly for like black men, right? Like I love what your friend said, live your freedom into existence, but how have as somebody who was literally, in the midst of doing a PhD, JD, type law degree, how does like just this experience kind of evolve some of your understanding and your lens on some of these issues that you were exploring before?
Well, one thing that I guess I would say I'm proud of is that I feel like even before this, I had a pretty good or great understanding of the criminal justice system and how
Right,
it affects our community, specifically black men.
right,
But going through this process, you really understand the nuances of why and of the why and the how as it relates to incarcerated individuals and the justice system, right?
mm,
So it's one thing to read about it. It's another to actually like experience it. Like for example, being how like well when you go up for like parole or like to get a judicial release or get released early, you want to have a clean record. Um, but when you actually in this environment, you see how it can be difficult having a clean record because if someone tries you, are you
mm,
going to defend yourself or are you going to not defend yourself? And if you don't defend yourself, then you become a target, right? Now,
mm,
if you do defend yourself, you risk going to the hole and getting a ticket. And that ticket is going to show up when you try to get out early. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to choose between, comfortability while you're in here, or comfortability after you get out. You know what I mean? And they
yeah,
both affect each other. So that's just a nuance that I feel like a lot of people, may not think about. Also, like for example, food. Like
mm-hmm,
this is a food desert. Like every prison is really a food desert. Like the
mm,
majority of our diet is just carbs.
yeah,
Rice, soup, beans, um, diced carrots, and then a lot of stuff you gotta, get from the commissary. Um, so we are very like protein deficient. And we lacking vitamins and everything like that. So that's another thing that can really mess with a lot of guys' hormones and deteriorate their bodies, right? Uh, and again, even the healthcare, like if you injured or something and you need some pain medication, get it off the commissary. Well, if you don't have money for the commissary, how can you alleviate that pain, right?
yeah,
Um,
wow,
so how you gonna get the money in the commissary? Some people get it from their family. Some people hustle. They have their own hustle. Now, if you hustle into surviving here, which essentially you really can't survive in prison without external funds of some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's
right,
from your family or your friends, or you actually working in here. So you're forced to make a living in here, and then what happens? You can get caught up, and even if it's not drugs or alcohol or anything, you can get caught up and boom, another ticket, which will extend your stay because you tried to survive while you were in here. So those type of nuances, are the things that you don't really learn about. You learn about the systematic, but not the micro barriers to
Yeah, just the
incarceration.
basic day to day, bro. Just like even hearing you talk, like it's always in the movies or TV, right? It's always like a guard or like somebody who makes it notoriously difficult, for incarcerated individual, and that's kind of the barrier. Or it's like some rival, gang or something dramatic like that. But you're just talking about like the nuances of every day to day life and the different traps that exist to just penalize folks more and more.
Yeah,
And I can only imagine how like the lack of nutrition actually. I mean, everything that you're saying for me is just like almost like, dang, better conditions would probably lead to folks being more reformed and being able to get out early versus the opposite, which is worse conditions designed to keep folks inside. So it is it's a fucked definitely a fucked kind of situation. Let me ask you this, bro, because we I think you brought it up, and I definitely want you to be able to express yourself. Um, so the racialization, the politicization of your case. Uh, I'm gonna throw that out there, and I just want you to respond with whatever you wanna say, because you brought it up, so I want to make sure you really could express yourself on that part.
yeah. So, as you know, just in general, the criminal justice system is racialized, right? I was just reading Chris Hedges, and he was
Hmm.
explaining how one of the markers, at least in America, one of the markers of being like a black male is to be, well, to have a run-in with the authorities, is to at least be incarcerated or arrested at least once, right? It's a marker of race,
Mm.
specifically our intersectional category.
Mm.
Um, but it's also more than that. And this is one thing that I would say I have more of appreciation for because I'm in Ohio, which is the opiate belt, the Rust Belt, and as we know, America just in general has a war on the poor people. So you have quite a few poor white people in here, and it's essentially because of drugs or them essentially doing what they have to do to survive. So yes, it's a racial element, but it's also definitely a class element as well,
Sure.
and it's how America in general sees criminality. So by default, the prosecution again is going to get the benefit of the doubt. These judges, they see so many people, read so many cases, they aren't really not giving their all or giving attention to every case that they should. So they going off of what they heard and what they seen, and they not going in with the nuance. And obviously they're humans, but their decisions are made based off of a lot of logical fallacies. Um, and different states again have different laws. So in Ohio, it's sufficient enough for one person to accuse you of something. That's
Mm.
sufficient evidence. If they make an affidavit of it, that's sufficient, right? And you can pound that with loose or loose or strong circumstantial evidence, and there you have your conviction. So when it comes to the appeal, one of the main things is, and it was a Ohio State Supreme Court Justice. I forgot his name, but he wrote an article about it, and I'll send it to you. And
Mhm.
he was actually talking about the appeals process and how a lot of times when somebody is vindicated, they still end up taking the plea deal after the fact because the prosecution, they won't just let it go, right? You have to go back to trial. So I give you an example. Say you get 20 to life,
Mhm.
right? They found out, on a rare case that they actually vindicate you. Say you didn't did 15. They can say, hey, you can go back to trial, and murder trials, it can take anywhere from one
Long
to
time,
five
yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can either go back to trial, you can take a plea deal for manslaughter, and you can be out today. Now, what would you do, right? You've already been failed by the system once.
Yep.
You got this miracle of being vindicated. Are you gonna just say, hey? I want to get out of here now, or are you going to wait another 2, 3, 4, 5 years to go back to trial and potentially lose again because you may not have a good lawyer, right?
Right.
Because that plays a role as well. So it's the system incentivizes acquiescence to these crimes, right?
Right.
It penalizes those who actually go to trial. So 97, like 90. I think when I read in the New Jim Crow, which is a great book, like
Excellent book.
97% of yeah, 97% of closed cases come by way of plea deals, right? So it's this thing in here. They always tell you, like,
Awesome.
even when you're in the county, they be like, hey, man, hey, take that. What's the plea? What's the plea? Take the plea, bro. Take the plea. You be like, bro, but I didn't do it. Hey, man, listen, what you facing? So, like, in my case, I will say I kind of got, you know, blessed, if you can say that, because I was facing about like 20 years, because it's an
And
attempted murder charge.
the sentence is 12, right?
Yeah. So my sentence is 12, but it's actually 9, right, with a 3-year gun spec. So in Ohio, when you commit a felony um, with a firearm, you have to have either a 1-year, 3-year, or 5-year gun spec, which is like mandatory. So I actually got 9. The minimum that I could get was 8. So I got, if I'm not mistaken, I got 1 year above the minimum. And I remember when the judge was sentencing me, he said, I respect you know, respect the prosecution. I will, respect the community that the alleged victim has come from, but I must take into account his youth. And he said this. This is on record. He said, I don't understand this. I don't understand, essentially this case, right? So I thought that was very telling. Um, but even in my case, so I was incentivized to take a plea deal. The plea deal they was offering me was like 8 years, I believe, for felonious assault, and then they dropped down to like 6, and then it was like, okay, 5 altogether, 3-year gun spec and 2 for the actual crime. And no, I went to trial, and typically, like I said, when you're incarcerated, a lot of people will tell you if you go to trial, they will max you out, meaning
Yeah.
they're going to give you the max, right? Um, and because they do that, a lot of people are deterred from actually going to trial, right?
Yeah.
The only time you only hear about really big trials is like Fed cases, right? Murder cases, and that's about it. But there's a whole host of other crimes that happen that people never hear about because people plead to them. And I didn't plead. Not only did I not plead, I testified on my own behalf, which is something that you generally don't see
Yeah.
in trial proceedings, right? So that happened. Um, obviously I got convicted, unfortunately, and now we're here. But that's just to give you an idea of how like these type of things work. You get punished for challenging the system, right? Take what we're gonna give you. This is the plea deal. Take it. And they offered me the 5-year plea deal like a day before my trial,
Mm.
right? So there we have it.
And I mean, I'm sure again, people who are listening, some of y'all may have context, but just to show you how nutty a lot of this is, it's like the system just hearing you explain that, bro, it's like the system, the folks that work in the system, they're all almost already aware of like the innocence, right? And it's just a
Yeah.
matter of like, nah, we got to get something. Like too much shit has started at this point. The ball is rolling, so we got to get something for them to even offer a plea, right? And it's just like you think about how destructive all of this can be to somebody's life because it's like you said, all right, I value my freedom. I know I didn't do this, but if you really were to be able to weigh all of the risk of taking something to trial, and even if you had the best lawyer in the world, right? It's like there's no guarantee that is going to be the best situation or the best, path to take. It's actually very low, and so, it's failure all over the place. Obviously, it's design failure, for me, and so I mean, like, I guess one thing that we were talking about this earlier, but one thing that like I feel like I just want to hear you kind of talk about because it's interesting is what happens after this, right? What happens after you re-enter, and which pathways allow you to kind of live the best life that you live. Because, you're cutting hair now, you're getting trade skills and everything. Obviously,
Yeah.
again, you were very accomplished academic as well and was on your way to that. I see your life being back in London and stuff, but or the continent, but just based on what you do and even like the next steps with Ohio Supreme Court, what would be the most ideal situation to get you back to where you want to be when you re-enter?
Well, you know me, bro. I've lived a lot of lives. You know what I'm saying? So I believe one of the best forms of intelligence is adaptability. So I can not only adapt to any situation, but I can thrive in that situation. So it really just comes down to, what.
You have 1 minute remaining.
All right, so let me call you back so we can finish that, all right?
Okay.
And recording. Utilization of an unapproved application and three-way calls to communicate are strictly prohibited and a violation of DRC policy. Thank you for using GTL.
Thank you for using GTL.
Hey.
Yo, bro.
Yeah, sorry, bro. This, the system, it takes like literally 2 minutes to call for whatever reason. All right.
You remember the question?
Yeah, so what do I plan to do?
Yeah, like just what do you plan to do like when you're out and yeah, pretty much essentially.
Yeah, so I got options, man. Some institutions, within the state of Ohio, they offer like, CDL, HVAC, electrical, things that, stuff really tailored to like blue collar as well as, barbering. As you said, I do have my degrees as well, my education. So it's really open. It's really open. Like my dad owns this business and he really wants me to help him run it. And I would actually love to do that, but parents be annoying sometimes. You know what I mean? But I do have the business acumen to do that. I have been, barbering in here, which I actually do enjoy. So I've just been looking at the economics of that.
You think you're nice?
Probably. You said what?
You think you're nice at cutting?
Yeah, bro. Actually, it was a barber in here today. I cut like 5 people today.
Dang.
It was an actual barber in a barber shop. Once the dude walked off, he gave me the head nod. He was like, "Yeah, I see you." And then I asked him. I asked him. I said, was it good? Was it cool?" He said, "It was super good, dog." So I'm like, "All right, bet." So he was the one who told me to like, "All right, come down to the barber shop." So I'm still waiting to get in there because I did get hired as a math tutor / teacher. But when I got hired around the same time, a CEO was killed in another prison not too far from here. So I didn't really want to be around them. A lot of people they tolerate you, and you can tell it's out of, because of race. They tolerate you, but any misstep could change your future, to be honest with you. So I was like, okay. So yeah, like I said, I got options. I can do advocacy still, get back in the nonprofit space, depending on the nonprofit. Obviously it's much tougher to do things, assuming that I still will have a felony on my record. It's much tougher to do things, but one of the good things I would say is that there's more options than it used to be back then for formerly incarcerated people. So yeah, but as you know me, I always have like a plan A through C, A through D, A through E. So I hope that answers your question.
No, absolutely, bro. I just kind of, wanted you to be able to speak to that because it's like, you're still dreaming, still have a vision, obviously, and they're still staying up. And I think we're running almost probably like 45 minutes. So I want to be able to also make sure we close this out, this particular conversation out with just how can anybody support any kind of way currently and going forward? How do you want kind of people to just kind of lean in and support you?
Well, obviously financially always helps, you know what I mean? And I have a Cash App set up. So what that does is that just help, offset like anything when it comes to commissary or, because they have this thing in here where we can do fundraisers where we can get like outside food like once or
Okay.
twice a month. Yeah, so, just like little luxuries like that. Um, Books, you know, so books, man, like what books are you reading? What books have, changed your life? Those type of books that can be sent to me or recommended to me so I can purchase them.
Okay.
And just,
Can
speaking
we
of
send books directly to you?
no, so remember earlier in the conversation when we were talking about just these minute barriers? So it,
Mm-hmm.
it used to be like that. You could like order from Amazon or
Yep.
Barnes and Noble and it comes straight to the institution. Now you have to put the money on our books, right? And I have to write a slip, send it in so it can get approved, and then they're gonna order the book. Now the thing with that is they're trying to get more money, right? So if the book is $20 and you
Mm.
could have bought it for 20, they may say, hey, 35, 40, you know? So things like that, it makes it, more difficult. But so that's why I say, but if y'all want to send me any type of books, tell me what the book is, put the money on the books, and I can order it. Send people a picture that I'm actually using for the books, and just speaking to me. To be honest, sometimes I get down and I don't feel like calling people. Um, but most of the time, I like speaking to people on the outside because I want to stay up to date on everything and stay connected to the outside. That makes me feel, in some cases, alive, and a lot of times
Mm.
alive actually. Um, so that definitely helps. Like my friend, she's getting her Ph.D. at Northwestern, so we still have our like intellectual conversations. And I'm still technically, I'm still a student. They still have me on
Okay.
sabbatical, so shout out to my university. Also, that's another thing. I would like to finish my degree, especially when I get out. If not that, then publish my work. So I'm currently talking to somebody about publishing my thesis because I actually did finish it. I just didn't get to defend it. But yeah, man, just speaking to people. I have a really robust like news app on my tablet, so it makes me feel nice that I still get to update people on things before they even know. Like, oh, I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
about that. I didn't know about that. I'm like, all right, cool, because I feel like I've always been that friend to be up to date. I'm a tech enthusiast, a futurist, and everybody else like, man, I don't know what's going on. So things like that, and I think it's nice to feel helpful and useful. So some of my friends may hit me up just to talk or just to vent. And that's something that I always did for them on the streets. So the fact that they still feel like they need that, just to feel needed, is nice as well.
Mm. I feel it, bro. I definitely feel it. And I'll make sure. I mean, Cash App is all over your social media, but I'll make sure to link that in whatever platform we post this on, and then via the GTL app. Is there any way we can send you cash through there, or is that strictly for like phones and stuff? I'm a little confused with how it's set up through PPL.
Bro, it's so complicated. And again, another minute barrier, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
people really want to, message me because you can message me on the tablet, but some people they have to call to put money on, which is like an inconvenience versus just doing it through the tablet.
Yeah.
And then it's set up differently. So if you put money on the tablet, it goes to what I want to purchase on my tablet and or my phone time. But if you want
Okay.
to put money on my books, that's a different process. And unfortunately, only approved visitors could put money on my books. So that's why the Cash App
It's
is
set
like
up for
important. Yeah. So my people can just take the money from my Cash App and just put it on my books, which they typically do immediately because I have quite a few approved visitors actually. But if it's a supporter or somebody, who I haven't spoken to in a minute that wants to help, the Cash App would be the best way.
okay. I got you. And last question, because you mentioned it before we got into the recording and everything. Like any like writing pieces, your medium. You mentioned maybe creating a Substack. Like anything we should be looking out for in the future, in the near future.
Yeah, man. So I finally start to feel comfortable again um, to start writing because I always wrote, but I just slowed down. Um, So two things, right? And this is going to come later down the line. One is gender and sexuality in the prison system.
Mm.
So I think that's very interesting in the way obviously that was my field. So to see how it operates within this space and other institutions is very interesting. So that's something that I'm definitely gonna write about. But an immediate future is I'm currently writing an essay and/or article about Afro Americans and the possibility of us being granted refugee status or asylum status if we were to seek asylum in another country.
Mm.
Now, I've spoken to two civil rights, human rights lawyers before about this topic, and when you just look at our history, the history of our persecution in this country, if we were almost any other demographic in another country that wasn't America, we would be able to be granted asylum, right? But because we are in America, the world's richest country, it's this, false notion of, well, yeah, we
How
suffer,
could
but
you
it
need
must not be
asylum
that
from
bad.
that place? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So especially given this new, second Trump term, I feel like it would be very, you know, beneficial to at least bring up that question, right?
Yeah.
Because what is happening to the rest of the world because of an American government is something that's been happening to us, right? And you do have examples of um, Afro Americans going to, for example, Cuba seeking
Mm-hmm.
asylum. So I just want to pose that question and get people really thinking, like, well, like, can I really do that in a practical way? And why it hasn't been really done or recognized by the United Nations.
Mm. No, I mean, that's a fact. 'Cause, I mean, we can go not too far back in history. Like, I mean, just during the Jim Crow era, right before civil rights, and that would have been very relevant for some of our parents and grandparents.
Yeah,
So you definitely
it's
speaking
relevant for
facts,
us.
bro. Yeah, us too. I was gonna say no. Realistically, I mean, crack cocaine epidemic. There's a lot of different time periods in which we could have mass incarceration in the '90s. There's so many things that
Yeah,
would have been relevant. So I look forward to hearing that, bro. What I will say, and I'm just saying this for the recording, so I'm gonna stop the recording soon. But definitely appreciate you taking the time, bro. Hopefully everyone that has taken a chance to listen has gotten to just hear from you. Their hearts have just warmed up because we all can hear that you still are definitely keeping your head well above water. And we just excited to stay connected and stay tapped in, bro, and to see your freedom. So I love you, bro, and I appreciate you for taking the time, man.
yeah, I love you too, man, and I appreciate everything you've done uh, and continue to do. Before you go,
Oh, we're
it's
not
this
getting off,
quote.
bro. We literally just ending the recording.
Okay,
We just
cool. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. So
No, no, no. Like,
however you want to sign off, you can sign off or just be like this. Sorry, I
yeah.
should have been more clear.
No, this is a quote that
Mm.
I wanted to say,
Okay.
and it was another incarcerated person that said this. Right? Are you able to chop this up for the recording?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I have my notes in front of me right now. Uh, okay, so yeah. Um, you ready?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so it's this quote that I seen that another incarcerated individual said in New Jersey, and I was reading
Mm.
Chris Hedges, and he said this, and it says, "We have been buried alive behind these walls for years, often decades. Most of the outside world has abandoned us, but for a few friends and family, and they can see that we're still worthy of life. It is to them, our saints, that we dedicate this play." And that really stuck with me because there's a lot of people that's left in here to rot, a lot of
Mm.
people that's forgotten about, and essentially we are in purgatory. Like we're living, but we're dead. So the people that actually does stick around, those people who check in on you, the people who want to know what's going on, are quite literally saints. You know,
Mm.
the light at the end of the tunnel, the people that we like. I'm gonna link up with this person when I get out. So for all of y'all, for everyone who's still there for me, just know Y'all my saints. So.